So AMD falls on Bank of America downgrades amid AI and PC concerns. Oh, what's going on here? Bank of America is not happy with AMD. AMD was in focus Monday as Bank of America downgraded the semiconductor company, citing lower estimates for artificial intelligence and PC-related revenue in 2025. A higher competitive environment, especially from NVIDIA, as well as growing cloud preference for custom chips from Broadcom and Marvell Technologies, is likely to limit AMD's market share gain potential, Bank of America analysts wrote. The analysts lowered their rating on AMD to a neutral from a buy. So basically, they're not. A note like this is not necessarily bearish. It's not really bullish technically, even though it sounds bearish. They're just kind of in that no man's land now at this point in time, which is where some analysts like to hide out. If they are actually bearish on a company, they just don't want to go full bear mode because sometimes that looks bad if you have a sell on a stock, right? From buy, he cut his 2025 and 2026 earnings estimates by 6% and 8%, respectively. He lowered his price target to $155 from $180. This is why it's difficult to take analysts that serious, right? Because do you see the problem I see? I hope everybody sees it right now. Look at this. So their price target is $155. AMD stock's right now trading at $130. How could you say you're neutral on the stock if you have a $155 price target? If you were really neutral on the stock, you would have a price target at 130, 135, something in there, right? Or maybe 140 because you're like, there's not much upside. The last time I checked, 130 to 155 is still substantial upside over the next year. Is it not? Of course it is. Like, that would actually be a bullish call on AMD, right? While our forecast implies solid 54% year-over-year growth, the limited opportunity to exceed higher street estimates could continue to be an overhang on AMD stock. AMD's pipeline remains 1 year plus behind NVIDIA, which is accelerating, and lacks a competitive networking switching optics portfolio. That could be changing shortly. The analyst also pointed to the recent comments from Amazon executives that said the cloud services provider has not yet seen heavy demand for AMD's chips as a negative. We're going to get into more of that in just a moment. PC weakness. In addition, the PC market could correct in the first half of 2025, which could bode negatively for Lisa Su's led company. Even though the PC server market has been growing modestly, AMD still has a chance to expand its share from 23% currently, given restructuring issues at Intel, which has a 69% share. AMD's challenge and opportunity in 2025 will be to take a share in enterprise PC, where Intel is dominant, while fending off threats from ARM-based rivals. So, the moral of the story is here, this sounds like just a bunch of worries, right? Bunch of worries. Like, it's the same way you could look at it. Like, I don't feel like we found out anything new here. The PC weakness, I mean, this borderline sounds bullish for AMD, if anything, right? So we really got to attack this part. As far as NVIDIA being in front of AMD, it's been in front of AMD. We all know that, right? That's why NVIDIA trades at like a $3.3 trillion market cap or whatever, and AMD trades at a $200 billion market cap. So to say AMD's behind NVIDIA, no duh. We all know that. There's no secret to that, right? There's $3 trillion plus of dollars between AMD's and NVIDIA's market capitalization. We know they're behind, right? But with that being said, AMD's got a very comfortable second place in this market that's going to be expanding rapidly over the next few years, and its stock price has not really reflected that, right? When we look at its stock price here, the stock's trading at $131. This is roughly the same amount the stock was trading at. I mean, you could go back, 3 years ago. Go back to this time 3 years ago. AMD was around this price, right? So that's something to keep in mind here. But something very important I want to show you here is this is looking on 1000xstocks.com. This is looking at trailing 12-month revenue for AMD, right? And for a while, it was going down. And so, you really didn't want to be in AMD stock until very recently. Like, now's the moment you want to be buying AMD stock. And the reason being is just recently, on a trailing 12-month basis, we started to have revenue go up, and that should continue. So we're at the beginning inning, essentially. We're at inning 1 or inning 2 of AMD's next growth cycle. So whenever companies, especially a great company like AMD's, at a beginning stage of a new growth cycle, you want to position into it. If we were a late stage in this, right? Let's say we're way out here, let's say it's 2 years from now and AMD stock's $300 or $400, something like that. Then you could have some caution and be like, "Ooh, boy, I don't know," because we're kind of late stage in this rally in regards to chips and chip stocks and this sort. You just can't say that in regards to AMD. We're at the beginning innings of revenue trending up here, and so we're going to likely see revenue trend up substantially over the next several years. And so, outside of some freak event, like that's what's going to likely transpire here. So, for that reason, I think it's really, really difficult to not be a buyer of AMD at this point in time, right? And something else additionally I want to show you here is we got to take a peek at AMD's P's, right? I mean, you're looking at a forward P on the stock about 28. Keep in mind that I wouldn't be surprised if they smash analyst estimate, so it might be trading, the reality might be 25 forward P right now. 2-year forward P at 23, that's probably too low, or probably too high. I mean, I think the forward P is probably like 21, 20 on a 2-year basis. So the moral of the story is here in regards to AMD is the company's trading far too cheap considering they're at the beginning stages of their next major growth cycle. So that one I'm just not on board with. Now, what about this drama here? AMD says report of AWS, so that now we're dealing with two of my companies, a stock I've held for a while that's doing me tremendous in Amazon, which now is 100% plus gainer, 7 stock in the public count to do that, right? AMD says report of AWS not yet seeing heavy demand is not accurate. AMD said last week's report that contained comments made by Amazon Web Services executives that it has not yet seen heavy demand for the former's artificial intelligence accelerators is not accurate. Quote, "We have a great relationship with AWS and the report was not accurate. We are actively engaged with AWS and end customers on AI opportunities," the AMD spokesperson said. Lisa Su's company was down, we know that, right? If customers have strong indicators that those are needed, then there's no reason to not deploy, said the gentleman from Business Insider last week. He also added that Amazon Web Services has not yet seen high demand for AMD's chips. Separately on Monday, Bank of America downgraded, well, we know that, we just went over that, right? AMD showed off its first AI accelerator last December, the MI300. The newest version is on track to be sent to customers in the current quarter. The company upped its 2024 guidance in October that it would generate $5 billion in revenue from AI accelerators, up from the previous view of $4.5 billion. So we're in a situation of who do you believe? I mean, the thing is, it's hard for me not to believe AMD in regards to this situation, and the reason being is they just upped their guidance. You wouldn't up your guidance if you weren't really seeing that sort of demand, right? And I don't think these sorts of companies are just going to place orders to place orders. So, yeah, this is, it's a hard one because it's a he said, she said, what's accurate, what's not accurate. Did something get taken out of context here? The moral of the story is I got to look at AMD's numbers. AMD's numbers are very good. The guidance is very good. The chip quality is very good. So the moral of the story here is this worry about short term. And I think this is just kind of what's going on in this AI cycle in general. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you guys, okay? Listen, there's all these worries about, are people using AI? Are they not using AI? How fast are these products going to take off, right? ChatGPT, how many people are actually using it? How often are they using it, right? The llama models, everything that's going on there, people are just wondering, it's a new thing. So people are wondering, how fast are these things going to take off? And I think this is going to kind of be a cloud over the whole space in the short term. Over the next 5-10 years, it's probably not a cloud at all. But in the short term, it's a cloud over everything, right? Where people are wondering, how fast is this stuff going to take off? And where are the killer applications for this? And I think people are kind of waiting for more of those. I think once you get a few of those, what I call killer applications, where it's just it seems like everybody's using this new product and they love it. As you have a few more of those take off, I think these worries will start to subside about AI is a bubble, about no one's using this stuff and things like that. So it's just a process you got to work through, right? It's just a process you got to work through. If we went back to the cloud back in the day, I'm sure we could have made arguments that the cloud was overhyped maybe in the short term and not that many companies were migrating to the cloud, it was moving too slow and those sorts of things, right? There's too much hype and excitement there. But at the end of the day, what did we end up seeing over the long term? We saw everybody moved to the cloud. Like that was the thing, right? If you go back to the internet, same exact thing, right? The internet was a process to build out. It wasn't like overnight everybody was using internet. Even smartphones, like, first smartphone was shown off, arguably by Steve Jobs, at least the first successful one, right? 2007. I didn't even get my first smartphone till what? 2012? So it doesn't matter what technology you're talking about. It usually takes several years to ramp to get really successful. If we're thinking about apps on the App Store, right? The App Store, that took a while to really build that out to be a big thing. That was like very minuscule for Apple's business for the longest time, right? But then as more and more popular apps blew up on the App Store, right, you saw Apple's revenues build out over years and years and years. So the moral of the story is I think people get too, excited and worried about the short term, and they get too pessimistic over what's going on short term, and then they miss the 10-year opportunity there, right? So as a new buyer to this stock, I'm like, give me the shares. I'll take all the AMD shares. You want to sell them at 130? Sell them to me at 130. I'll buy them for 130, 150, 100. I don't care. Whatever I'm getting AMD stock at is, I think, a pretty low value compared to where the company will be selling at several years from now. Hey, it's Jeremy. I hope you really enjoyed watching that clip here today. What you're looking at in front of you right there, that's 1000xstocks.com. That's my advanced software that I've been working in the background creating for a long time. This software is so much more advanced than what others are presenting out there in the market. And as somebody that's been in the market 15 years, I want to create something that was simple, that had exactly everything I needed to make my judgments on companies, such as forward P ratios, 2-year out forward P ratios, price to sales ratios, forward price to sales ratios. I wanted the ability to be able to compare different companies versus each other. I wanted to be able to compare a Meta versus a Google versus an Apple and be able to see all those different metrics laid out all next to each other. I wanted a service that I could listen to conference calls right through and even be able to toggle and adjust the speed I wanted to listen to those conference calls. I wanted a service that I could search SEC filings right through. I wanted the ability to do that all in one service, and that is exactly what I've created with 1000xstocks.com. If you want to apply for access to this, go to the description area of this video. You can click that link and go ahead and apply for access to this. If you don't want to do that, you can go to 1000xstocks.com. Enjoy. Let's start out with AMD. Let me address this right at the top. We gotta talk about the party. Here I am. I'm walking into this party, right? Here I am. And meanwhile, everybody's walking out. And they all got frowns in their face. And they're like, this party sucks, man. Don't go in there. It's not even worth your time. We've been at this party. Nothing's going on. And I'm like, dude, the party's about to start. Well, you just came to the party too early. What are you doing? You didn't come to the party at the right time. The party's going to get going around midnight, around 1 a.m. That's when we're going to start partying. Y'all came at 7 p.m. and thought we were going to have a party. What kind of party did you think this was? And so that's how I feel coming into AMD stock and starting to buy the stock now is people, the sentiment's very negative. They're calling it advanced money destroyer. This is a 3-year and 1 month chart I'm showing you right here, okay? Over the past 3 years and 1 month, this stock is down 15%. Think about all the inflation that has happened in the world in the past 3 years and 1 month. Think about if you just had your money in a savings account. Think about if you just had your money in treasuries, right? You would have done far better than AMD stock. If you would have just been investing in the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, anything like that over the past 3 years and 1 month, you would have done far better than AMD, right? That's brutal. That's absolutely brutal. And so the sentiment is extremely poor. You know what stock this reminds me of as far as the sentiment goes? It reminds me a lot, if you weren't tracking this channel back then, I'm sure a lot of you guys were watching back then, but in the back half of 2023 and the beginning of 2024, what stock was I buying very heavy that had a very similar sentiment setup? What stock was it? PayPal. I started acquiring PayPal stock very heavy in the back half of 2023 and going into the beginning of 2024. And the sentiment couldn't be worse because people had lost money on that stock for year after year after year, right? And here I was getting involved in the stock in the 50s and 60s, and I'm like, the party's about to start. I don't know where everybody's going here, right? And Alex Chris got brought in at PayPal, and we've seen what's happened with that company ever since, right? So I'm seeing a very similar setup here in regards to AMD, where the sentiment's just awful. If I pull up an 8-month chart of AMD, it's nasty. I can understand why people call it advanced money destroyer. The stock's down 38% in the past 8 months. Oh my gosh. Like that is a nasty move down. Additionally, if we back it up, we want to look at the fourth quarter of 2022. So 2 years ago, right? From those lows that were hit. Pretty much all the big tech stocks hit a low in October, November of 2022 after the tech crash. I call it like the tech bubble 2.0 essentially happened, right? And just all of those tech related stocks got wrecked. Well, since that time period, AMD stock's up 133%. So it looks like, that's actually pretty good. In a 2-year performance, roughly, that's pretty dang good. Here's the issue. Their main competitor, NVIDIA, is up 1,136% over that time. So that's a crazy divergence there, right? So people could look at that and be like, yeah, sure, AMD's up, a little over double, but NVIDIA's over 10x. So I should have been investing in NVIDIA. So once again, I get the whole negative sentiment, but let me show you something that's very important here. Very important. Look at this. So if we don't want to cherry pick the data, right? And we just say, pull up a 5-year of AMD, pull up a 10-year of AMD. Let's see those, right? You look at the 5-year and 10-year performance of this company, it's pretty darn impressive. In the past 5 years, the stock's up 232%. If I can make 232% on every stock I buy over a 5-year basis, I'll be a very happy camper. I'll be a very happy camper. I won't complain about that. There's no way I can complain about that, right? 232% in 5 years, give me that all day, every day. I'll gladly take that. On a 10-year performance, AMD stock's up 4,500+% in the past 10 years. I'll take that performance any day of the week. Okay, that's incredible what this company's done over the past 5 years and 10 years, right? When you don't try to cherry pick the data and say, well, here was this and that, right? Now, additionally, this looks at the 10-year versus their competitors, right? NVIDIA and Intel. NVIDIA and Intel would always be considered AMD's two main rivals or two main competitors, right? So $100,000 into NVIDIA stock 10 years ago is now worth $26 million, which is ridiculous, right? $100,000 into AMD is worth $4.6 million. So I understand $4.6 million is not $26 million, but who's beat NVIDIA stock in the past 10 years? NVIDIA stock might be the best performing 10-year stock in the entire stock market. It's a one-on-one freak situation. I'm sorry, but $100,000 into $4.6 million, that's amazing, right? Now, if you'd put $100,000 into Intel in that same amount of time, right, you would have about $56,000 in Intel. You could make an argument that maybe you'd have a little more because of dividends that were paid out to Intel over time, but still, the moral of the story is your shares would be worth $56,000 now, and they were worth $100,000 10 years ago, right? So the moral of the story is here, AMD's a beast. It's just not as beastly as NVIDIA, right? Lisa Su, the CEO of this company, she just hit 10 years being CEO of this company, right? She became CEO of NVIDIA in October 2014. And what a span. If you compare her against just about any CEO out there in the public markets the past 10 years, who's done better than her? Sure, Jensen has, right? But it's very difficult to make an argument that whoever you're going to put her on the list, whether it's Jensen or Elon, whoever, they're all legends. They're all crazy legends, right? And she's in that mix. Now, look at the revenue of this company over time. This was the first full year. 2015 was the first full year of her as CEO, right? They did $3.99 billion. Then they went into 4.27, 5.39, 6.47, 6.73, 9.76, 16.4, $23 billion of revenue. And then they finally had a decline year, right, in 2023. And now on a trailing 12-month basis, our revenue is back positive again. So under Lisa Su's management, right, ever since her first full year at the company, they've only had one down revenue year. That's pretty darn impressive. What she's doing here is very, very impressive. Now, that shows you the performance of NVIDIA over time, right, and how their revenue's trended over time. But what about recently? Wow, we had some very important things going on here recently I have to show you guys. There's basically 4 segments of NVIDIA's business. There are 2 entree businesses, which are the big dogs, right? And there's 2 side dish businesses. What we're looking at here is entree 1 and entree 2. Data center. Their latest quarterly numbers came in at $3.5 billion of revenue. That was up 122% year over year. Incredible number. This has a long way to grow in the future. Operating income for the latest quarter for the data center business came in at $1 billion. That's versus a little over $300 million a year ago, which means they over 3x'd their operating income on a year-over-year basis. Their profitability is exploding to the upside now. Client segment revenue went to $1.9 billion. That's up 29% year over year. Operating income went to $276 million from $140 million, which is about a 2x year over year. So operating income in data center went up over 3x, and operating income on client segment went up around 2x. That's incredible. Now, their side dish businesses are where the trouble spots are for AMD right now in the short term. I think they're going to both flip over to the positive in the middle to the second half of 2025. Very important. Gaming segment revenue was down 69%. That business is just in a bad spot short term. I'm fully believing that things are going to turn around. And based upon the trends I see in the numbers, in the data, and kind of hearing what management's saying, there's no doubt in my mind that gaming should turn positive in the middle to back half of 2025. Same exact thing in regards to embedded segment, $927 million. I was down 25% year over year. Based upon the trends and how I'm seeing the numbers come in, that's another business that should inflect positive middle to second half of 2025 for this company. So then we're going to have the entrees rolling and the side dishes moving for NVIDIA. Now, their latest outlook. Look at the latest outlook for this company. They basically said they're going to do $7.5 billion of revenue, right? Plus or minus $300 million. AMD, Lisa Su leading this company, usually a little more on the conservative side. My guess is they probably do $8 billion to $9 billion of revenue in this quarter they're going to report here in a month or two from now. Gross margins expected to skyrocket for the company up to 54%. Keep in mind the gross margins recently have been in the 40s. So we're talking about a major expansion in margins here. And this is going to be their best quarter ever, by far. By far, this is going to be their best quarter. And I don't think it's in too distant in the future that AMD is going to start putting up $10 billion revenue numbers for this company overall, right? Now, here's the deal, right? Now I'm looking at 1000xstocks.com, and I'm looking essentially at trailing 12-month revenue of AMD over time. Now, what's interesting is a lot of people were buying AMD stock during this time period, right? This was not the time period to buy AMD stock. They basically had flatlining revenues for, many, many quarters. And if you look at the trailing 12-month basis, it's very self-explanatory. You don't need to be a chart master to understand what's going on there. Their revenue was going a whole lot of nowhere for the longest time. So that was not the time to buy AMD stock, right? Now's the time to be buying AMD stock. And the reason being is we just started to inflect majorly positive when it comes to trailing 12-month revenue. And that trend's not going to end anytime soon, in my opinion. You're going to see this revenue on a trailing 12-month basis continue to skyrocket for the next several years. Not for the next several quarters, for the next several years in regards to AMD. So this is the time to be a buyer of this stock. Now, additionally, you're looking at a forward P on the stock that's a steal deal. We're talking about, we're going in the second inning of growth for this company and this growth cycle the company's about to go through, right? The first inning was just inflecting trailing 12-month revenue up, right? Now we're going in the second inning, which is like take it on up, right, for the next several quarters, right? So given the fact that this company is about to go in their second inning, trading in the 20s when it comes to your forward P doesn't make sense at all. It's way, way, way too low for this company. Like forward P on the stock should be in the 40s right now, if not 50s. Now, additionally, you look at the gross margins. This company's been in the 40s recently. They're going to get crazy lift. Company's projecting 54% in the latest quarter, and I think that's going to continue to climb. Net margins of this company are about to climb like insane. 7.5% net margins recently for the company. They're not even going to be in the same ballpark as that. To show you here where NVIDIA's at margin-wise, right? NVIDIA's at 75% gross margins, right? And NVIDIA's at 50% plus net margins. Now, AMD's got crazy expansion coming in regards to their gross margins and their net margins. They're not going to get to NVIDIA's level, in my personal opinion. They're not going to go from 48% to 75%. But do I see the company go into high 50s, maybe even low 60s? Absolutely. Additionally, when it comes to their net margins, do I see them getting to 50% plus? Absolutely not. But do I see them over the next several years getting net margins 30% plus? Absolutely. So we got a lot of margin expansion coming for this company over this next several years. Now, additionally, if you look at next year earnings per share growth, look at it. AMD is going to far, far outpace NVIDIA, right? And keep in mind that number's low. Based upon what I'm looking at, 200% is kind of in the bag for earnings per share growth for next year. Now, additionally, if you look at AMD on a trailing 12-month revenue basis versus current year expected revenue growth versus next year, basically, we have acceleration. And I see that continue to accelerate for the next several years. Now, that's fun times. Whenever you can be in a stock where their revenue keeps accelerating for several years in a row, it usually means great things for the stock price. It's usually a very fun time to be an investor of that company. Now, NVIDIA went through that cycle where their revenue kept accelerating. Unfortunately, that's now over for NVIDIA. So NVIDIA is kind of, unfortunately for them, they've entered a no-fun stage. The no-fun stage doesn't mean you can't make money in the stock. It's harder to get the gains because now people start looking at the revenue growth and it keeps going down on a percentage basis, right? So NVIDIA next year, maybe they grow revenue. I mean, we'll see. Maybe it's 30%, 40%, 50%. We'll see, 60%. But regardless, people have gotten used to triple-digit revenue growth. So then the next year, let's say NVIDIA grows revenue 10, 15, 20%. Still a good number, and especially off a big base, but people start looking at it and they're like, ugh, that's it? Like, what happened in the days when NVIDIA was growing 100% plus? So we got to understand there's going to be a big inflection here between AMD and NVIDIA, where essentially AMD is going to be the hot one that everybody's going to want to flock to because they got the accelerating growth. And NVIDIA, unfortunately, will have the decelerating growth rates quite substantially, especially over this next 2 years now, right? Now, another thing we're going to need to talk about and I need to address in this video is the competition aspect, right? Because there's some people that don't understand the space well enough, in my opinion, and they think that in order for AMD to win, NVIDIA has to lose, right? They have this view that it's a zero-sum game, and that's just the way it is. No, that's not true at all. AMD does not need NVIDIA to lose for them to win. That's not the way this works, right? And also, I'm not banking that AMD needs to become some $3.4 trillion, $3.5 trillion market cap, right? Well, I'll show you my projections in a moment, and you'll see there's massive upside in the stock. But for this to be a huge success for me, I don't need it to be, a $3, $4, $5 trillion company, $10 trillion company, right? And NVIDIA investors now at this point in time, they need NVIDIA to become a $5, $10 trillion company to have that be a successful investment. I don't need that, right? So that's important to understand. Now, the reason you got to understand, like, this is not a zero-sum market. The markets, the TAM, the total addressable market, is expanding so rapidly, right? This is back in October. AMD CEO predicts $500 billion AI chip market by 2028. Lisa Su's not just some crazy pumper that's just going to say whatever to say whatever. No. She looks at everything very mathematically. If you understand anything about her background, her upbringing and whatnot, mathematics. She looks at the trends, the numbers, kind of projects out what's likely to happen, and she's predicting a $500 billion plus market for AI chips by 2028. That means there's plenty of money to go around for AMD, for NVIDIA, right? It's not like it's just one company's going to win and the other company has to lose. That's not the way this works, okay?